Thank you, Mixed Chair, and I would like to also move an amendment to Section 1. Has that amendment been distributed? So I would ask that the clerks distribute the amendment. It will be on change sheet NDP 1. I will move the amendment, explain it a little bit, and then speak to why we're putting forward this amendment at this time. So I think it's fine to go ahead before everybody has the change sheets if there's questions. So at any rate, page 1, clause 1, proposed section 29A, subsection A, subsection 2, line 3, delete July and substitute October. Subsection B, subsection 4, line 1, delete May and substitute shall. Subsection C, subsection 4, lines 2 and 3, delete one of the 7 days following the Tuesday that would otherwise be election day and substitute the second Tuesday in May in the 5th calendar year following election day for the most recent general election. Page 1, clause 2, delete July 15th, 2025 in the final line and substitute October 21st, 2025. Mixed Chair, there are some striking similarities between the bill as it stands and the amendment we are suggesting, and the main one is that they both specify fixed election dates. So we don't intend to change any of that. The amendment we just spoke to was an amendment that contemplated consultation. We did support that amendment, but it is our position that at this point, given the public feedback we've received, given the public polling that's been done, given the law amendments committee that was held, we have a pretty good sense of public opinion. And so this amendment attempts to amend this otherwise very good bill to more properly align it with that public opinion and with what we think would be best practice. So I just want to go through it for a minute. So obviously delete July and substitute October. That's pretty straightforward, Mixed Chair. What we're suggesting in this case is that instead of enshrine a July election date in law, we would move that to October. Now, the main rationale that's been given against an October date is that that could come into conflict with other elections. But interestingly, Mixed Chair, we've also heard from people that October is voting season. So we saw in that poll, which I've already tabled, that people expect to vote in October. If you knock on their door in October, they don't say things like, what are you doing here? Is there an election on? I'm on my way to the cottage, or I'm changing a diaper, or whatever it is. Like in October, people expect, that would be me for a long time.
Babies in October.
Less childcare in October, but I'll get to that in a moment. So that was not an unintentional analogy, just in case members of the House may think so. So we are suggesting an October election date, but if you look to those of you who have the change sheet to section C here of our amendment, what we're saying is where October would conflict with another election, so either a federal election or a municipal election, that date would automatically move to May, because we've also heard that May is an acceptable choice for people. May, the myriad concerns addressed about students, both school students and post-secondary students, that May is still in that basket that would address all of those concerns. So we're suggesting October date, May if there's a conflict, and then in the middle there, section B is delete May and substitute shall in subsection 4. So we're just saying if a Tuesday that would be an election day doesn't work because it conflicts with a holiday of some kind, cultural or religious significance, etc., that automatically the Chief Electoral Officer just moves that date 7 days. So we think that this is a pretty comprehensive and common sense suggestion. We are trying to reflect what we heard. You know, I think by now we all say at second reading. We look forward to what people say at law amendments. And what people said at law amendments were, we don't want to vote in July. And so we did the work of, looking at that poll, listening. I mean, I have a stack of letters similar to the ones that the member for Bedford Basin referenced earlier. I won't read all of those. Many of them the Premier was copied on, so I know that these members also will have seen those letters, and that is what we're doing here, is to respond to them. And so what I want to address, as I think, skillfully foreshadowed moments ago, is one of the main reasons that we are in favor of this change, and it's one that we haven't really spoken about, and that is that fixed election dates, and the reason we support the fixed election dates in this bill are important in many ways. One of the reasons that they're so important is because they establish clear expectations for women who want to become involved in politics. So we know that women often, women and gender diverse folks, we have lots of changing gender norms, but unfortunately, we have a lot that are also very stubborn. And one of them is that women tend to be, in the vast majority of cases where they are in a domestic partnership, especially where children are involved, in charge of the details. I myself spent a lot of time texting this morning about how my son was going to get home from aftercare, and my daughter was going to get to dance, and my other daughter was going to get to basketball, and luckily my mom can be at my house for the 40 minutes that serves as a gap between all those times. And we all do that, right? We all do that. But those challenges become a lot larger when it comes to considering whether you would put your name on a ballot. Because obviously we need to understand if we can do it, right? And so those of us who have the support systems that are flexible enough to accommodate that, and the financial situation that is stable enough to accommodate that uncertainty, can go ahead and jump in, but many others can't. And so fixed election dates are important, and it is the same reason that we support fixed election dates that we don't support a July fixed election date, because we know that summer is much more intensive for parents of young children. Caregiving responsibilities are higher. There is just no question about it. And, I think, I'll speak for myself and many of my colleagues, as we just went through a summer campaign, you don't know that your kids are going to be in school every day if you have school-age kids, right? You have to pay for summer camp if you can afford to do that, and many times you can't. Between September and June, children attend school for most of the day, like 8:30 to 3-ish, depending on, what regional center you're in. And, if you can get a space that you can afford and you need it, Excel here in the HRM and other places provide before and after school care. And so because, obviously we have a situation where we have a number of both men and women in the workforce, although women's workforce participation continues to lag in the wake of COVID, we have sort of structured a society that can accommodate that, but it's mainly structured around our school system and around our school. And during the summer months, that support system for most evaporates. And so we have day camps and grandparents if you're lucky, and play dates and vacation time if you can plan it. But you do not have a situation where you know that your kids are going to be taken care of during the week. And it's not something that you need to pay attention to for those daytime hours. Summer camp registration opens in March. And if you have ever been, if anyone in this chamber has ever been responsible for managing this particular parental nightmare, it's a disaster, number one. But you'll have those dates in your calendar, and you'll be trying to jockey to see which camps you can get your kids in, and what can you afford, and when is it, and where is it located, and who can take them, and who can pick them up, and do they even run all day? They often run for a week. They might be a local community center or a museum or a child care center or aquatic club. There is no transportation to these camps. You have to pack a lunch and a snack and a water bottle and sunscreen and a bathing suit, all that stuff, right? And so there's a different routine every single week. And again, I really want to point out, and this is something, you know, I spoke about this a lot when I was the education critic, and I want to speak about it again. I mean, we have a world that actually hasn't caught up to the fact that people of all genders work. Like we just haven't caught up yet, and you know we're getting there slowly but surely. But so many of the structures in our society still look the way they looked a long time ago, and so we're going to have a lot of opportunity, hopefully, to look at great bills coming forward from the government that address some of that. Fingers crossed. But here is a place right now where the government can address that, because if we change an election date so it's in the summer, knowing that there are not those backups in place, that there are not those structures in place for parents, particularly parents with less resources and less means and maybe less social connections or less family connections, we are excluding some really good candidates. And if you're a woman and you're in that situation and you're considering running for office, you may well decide that this is not the job for you. And, you know, when Alexa McDonough was first elected, there wasn't even a women's bathroom. We've talked about that a lot. But what I also want to say is that now that we have our first gender diverse MLA, we now have a gender neutral washroom, you know, which is amazing. And the former Minister of Community Service and now the current Minister of Community Services and Status of Women have made sure that there are menstrual products available in those washrooms. Like, we continue to progress, and that's really important. But, you know, we've also taken steps backwards, and we've seen, unfortunately, a number of backward steps in the time that I've been in this House. I would suggest, and this is going to maybe raise some ire from my colleagues on this side of the House, that the dissolution of school boards was a gender parity issue. You know, 55% of elected school board members were women, and school boards historically and currently in other places are often the first point of entry for women who want to enter elected life, including my colleague and the member for Halifax Needham. But this is important, right? Because what are the pathways? We talk a lot about how we want, I've been to a number of panels and discussions about why we want, how do we get more women in politics? How do we get more gender diverse people in politics? How do we have more diversity generally in politics? And, you know, Manitoba NDP MLA Nahanni Fontaine has described politics as a profoundly white male space. And notwithstanding the diversity in this chamber, I think we can all acknowledge that that continues to be true, and I think there's been good efforts on all sides of the aisle to address that. But, you know, there have been more MLAs named John elected in our legislature than women, like a lot more, twice as many. And that's something that should really be at the forefront of all of our minds when we look at any legislation. So this is why we've often talked about the need. No offense to the Johns across the aisle. I wasn't speaking of specific Johns. I was just talking about John, you know, just using it as an example. But I want to say that I do want to take this opportunity to point out, you know, people have been teasing us a little bit today that, you know, the NDP is the party of discontent, and the Premier's made many comments. So the opposition's going to oppose, and that's what they're going to do. But I submit, Mixed Chair, and I want to say this, that we never oppose unless we have a principled reason to oppose. We don't oppose for the Premier knows, the Premier knows, Mixed Speaker, that when my colleagues and I get up to speak on a piece of legislation, we do so because it is our job to represent our constituents and to bring an alternate view. And I will say that no one took that job more seriously than the Premier himself when he was in opposition, mixed chair. So I want to say to the members of this House that we have very principled reasons for wanting a fixed election date that would reflect the realities of potential candidates, particularly women and gender diverse folks. And in that context, I want to say that this notion that it's some kind of unbelievably complex, uncrackable code that we could elect more women and gender diverse and racially diverse people to this House is just wrong. And I think that our caucus is proof of that. And there's a reason that our caucus is proof of that. It's because we pay attention every step of the way. We pay attention from the very beginning of a nomination process to the way in which we conduct a nomination process, to the way in which we recruit people, to ensure that we are giving the same or greater chance to historically underrepresented groups to take a seat in this House. And I want to say that this amendment affords the government the opportunity to do the same. So the next time someone asks the government, what are you doing to increase gender diversity and participation in politics, if they pass this amendment, they can say, you know what, we listened to Nova Scotians, we understood it was going to be harder for many of them to run, and we changed the date. So I look forward to the government taking this seriously, and with that, I'll take my seat. Thank you, Mixed Chair.